Imagine relying on a fixed income to cover, your rising grocery bills, utility costs, the whole shebang, only to find out your projected raise for the entire year might be literally as low as 27 bucks a month. It sounds like a total math error, right? Like there's no way. But according to some early leaked estimates based on first quarter data, this could absolutely be the real concrete scenario for millions of folks relying on Social Security, SSDI, or SSI. So welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're objectively breaking down the actual mechanics behind these newly leaked 2027 cost of living adjustment estimates. We're going to completely strip away the noise and just look directly at the math. We want to understand exactly how these numbers are calculated, why they seem so incredibly detached from the prices we're all seeing at the checkout line, and, crucially, that compounding impact of Medicare. Let's just quickly lay out our roadmap. First, the projections. Second, the math behind them. Third, the Medicare trap. And finally, number 4, preparing for stagnant income. Let's peel this onion.
All right, Section 1, the projections. Let's take a closer look at the numbers.
Okay, so independent advocacy groups, the folks who specifically track the government's inflation indexes, they've released their May projections for the 2027 COLA. And the estimate they've arrived at is, well, it's a historically low 1.5% to 2% increase. To understand where this even comes from, we really have to look at the math behind the projection. See, the formula relies heavily on first quarter inflation data. And earlier this year, we actually saw a temporary cooling in some specific sectors, notably wholesale energy and certain manufactured goods. When those specific categories mathematically drag down the broader average, well, it locks in a lower baseline for these early estimates. And that happens regardless of whether the specific things you buy every single day are actually getting any cheaper. Now, I know percentages can sometimes feel a bit, abstract. So let's translate what a 1.5 or 2% bump actually looks like in practice. Let's anchor that percentage to some concrete math. If we look at a standard Social Security check of $1,800 a month and we apply that projected low-end raise to it, we get roughly $27 extra a month. Now, when groceries are up significantly year over year and utility rates are literally spiking across the country, how far does 27 bucks actually go in a modern checkout line? As the source material highlights, there is a severe mathematical disconnect going on here. While everyday people are dealing with record-high local prices for bare necessities, this formula spits out an amount that likely doesn't even cover a fraction of a recent electricity bill hike. So you're probably asking, how exactly does the government arrive at such a mathematically low number when living costs are so stubbornly high? Well, that brings us to Section 2, the math. CPI-W versus CPI-E. To really understand that $27, we have to look at the exact mathematical index that is legally used. It's called the CPI-W. That stands for the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. Objectively speaking, this is the legal, systemic standard the government currently uses to measure inflation and determine your COLA raise. But hey, catch that key phrase there? Urban wage earners. This metric is explicitly designed to track the spending habits of younger, working-age people who are, actively commuting to a job. From a purely mathematical standpoint, a massive chunk of the CPI-W formula is strictly dedicated to weighting the costs of things like gasoline for daily commutes, work clothes, and buying lunch away from home. When the prices of those specific urban commuter items flatten out or drop, the CPI-W formula registers low inflation overall, even if other localized sectors of the economy are still running exceptionally hot. And this brilliantly illustrates where the mathematical friction actually happens. Look at these two totally different baskets of goods. The CPI-W basket, again, the one legally dictating the COLA, heavily weighs things like laptops, used cars, electronics, and those commuting costs we just talked about. But the alternative, the CPI-E basket, the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, that tracks what seniors actually spend their money on, things like healthcare, prescription drugs, and housing. Let's dig into the mathematical delta between these two baskets because it's wild. Healthcare costs historically rise at a much faster percentage rate than general consumer goods like electronics, right? The reports point out that specific senior out-of-pocket costs are basically skyrocketing by double digits. But because the COLA calculation is mathematically bound to the CPI-W's electronics and commuting data, the true inflation experienced by retirees is largely just bypassed in the final equation. It creates this compounding mathematical deficit year over year where your purchasing power continuously erodes simply because the formula isn't measuring the right expenses.
Moving right along to Section 3, the Medicare trap. This is what happens when math collides.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding how this super low COLA projection mechanically interacts with your Medicare Part B premiums. Let's walk step by step through this hypothetical but honestly highly realistic math scenario. The Medicare trustees have already signaled that Part B premiums are likely going to increase again next year. Why? Mostly because of general healthcare inflation and the system absorbing highly expensive new treatments, like those novel Alzheimer's drugs. These massive new costs mathematically force premiums up across the board. So imagine your projected COLA raise is that 27 bucks we calculated earlier. But then the standard Medicare Part B premium hikes up by, say, $30. Well, when you subtract a $30 premium increase from a $27 raise, you are left with a net deficit. Because the COLA is calculated using the CPI-W and Medicare premiums rise based on actual healthcare inflation, this $30 versus $27 deficit is basically a systemic recurring mathematical certainty. The Medicare increase completely wipes out the COLA raise before it even reaches your pocket. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, wait, is my check actually going to go down? And that is where the hold harmless rule comes into play. By definition, the hold harmless rule ensures that a standard Medicare Part B premium increase cannot reduce a person's net Social Security benefit below what it was the previous year. So, for the vast majority of you, the good news is your check won't actually shrink. However, the sheer math of the situation means your check won't grow either. It results in a totally flatlined, completely stagnant income for the entire year, despite the rising cost of living happening all around you. Also, it's absolutely critical to note the mathematical caveat of this rule. It doesn't apply to everyone. If you're a high-income earner subject to IMMA surcharges, or if you're a newly enrolled beneficiary who wasn't even collecting Social Security the previous year, you are not protected by this provision. For those folks, their net checks mathematically can and will decrease.
Okay, let's get practical. Section 4, preparing for stagnant income.
Knowing the math and how the mechanics work is the first step, right? But let's look practically at what you can do about it right now to protect your fixed income. The source material emphasizes two very specific, actionable steps. First up, use the upcoming open enrollment period to meticulously review your Medicare Advantage plans. The math behind this is super powerful. Switching to a more cost-effective Advantage plan might mathematically lower your annual out-of-pocket maximums or even offer premium givebacks, and that can directly counter the Part B systemic premium hike we just analyzed. Second, start looking into appealing any property tax hikes in your local municipality, like today. Because housing costs are wildly underrepresented in that CPI-W formula relative to a senior's actual budget, property tax surges are one of the biggest unmeasured threats to fixed incomes. Every single dollar saved on an appealed property tax is a dollar that stays right there in your pocket when your primary income remains mathematically stagnant. This entire breakdown leaves us with a critical, kind of provocative question to think about. As the gap between official inflation metrics, like the CPI-W we covered today, and the actual spending reality of seniors keeps widening, will the calculation methods eventually be forced to evolve? Thank you so much for walking through this complex math with me today. It's just a really fascinating look at how bureaucratic formulas directly impact our daily lives. Because at the end of the day, bureaucratic math dictates daily reality. Keep seeking to understand the mechanics behind the numbers, and as always, keep learning.